Hi, I'm Diane Evans at PhotoFluent. Welcome to our weekly life program. And today I have a very exciting topic that I'm pretty excited about. And it's the viewer experience of your photos. And if you're thinking, what? That doesn't even make sense. Yeah, my students hear about this all the time. And I find the words viewer experience, think about the viewer experience coming out of my mouth so many times when we're doing photo critiques, when I'm talking to them about their photos. And so I thought, I don't think I've ever gone live to talk about this. And today is the day. Welcome. I'm so glad you could join. So let's jump in because that's how excited I am about this. Now, when you create a photo, one of the key things to think about is why are you creating it? What's the end result? I think when you're in a new place and you see a scene that you're excited about, it's a new place, you've never been there before, and it's beautiful or it's interesting. You get your camera ready and you want to just capture what you're looking at. If you think of it a little deeper, think of it further down the line. Now, this doesn't have to take a lot of time because I do get a lot of travelers who say, I don't have time to figure all that out ahead of time. The more you think about it, the more automatic it will become. It will just become part of your process. So let's think about, you're creating a pretty picture, sure. We all want our photos to be pretty. But the other goal, the end goal of when you get your photo back is to think about the viewer. Who is your viewer? What does that mean? Well, it's whoever sees your photo. It could be you. It could be you in a month. It could be you in 2 years when you go back and look at your photos. But it's also family or friends, a social media audience, blog readers. Hey, you know what? Let's dream big. An art gallery owner or museum curator, whoever looks at it later. So if you're thinking about that as you're making the photo, what do you want? What do you want the viewer, who could be you, it could be that museum curator, what do you want them to see when they look at your photo? What do you want them to feel? You want them to appreciate the beauty of whatever it is you're looking at. You're going to Montmartre in Paris, and it's the first time you've ever seen it. It's up on that hill, and it's something to behold. The surroundings, the village around it, the streets. I say village, I know it's Paris, but it feels like it's a smaller part of Paris, like it's a village feel. So you want them to experience it with you, to feel the moment, not just say, that's a pretty church, or that's a pretty, person or landscape. You want it to be more experiential. Now, how the heck do you do that is the question, right? 4. I almost held up my fingers at 4 and thought, are there 4? Yes, there are 4 ways that we're going to talk about today. Composition is a way that you can really help guide the viewer. Think of it this way. Your experience as a tourist might be visiting Paris or Barcelona. And sometimes you'll get a tour guide to help you with that because they're familiar with the area. Say you don't have a lot of time to prepare, to go through the guidebook to figure out where to go. So you work with a tour guide. Could be a group. You're the tourists, they're the guide, and they guide you through Barcelona and show you the highlights. They're holding your hand basically and taking you through the city. Your job as the photographer is to be the tour guide of your photo. So you're taking the viewer by the hand and saying, look at this first and then look at this. And as you're going, this is the feeling that I want you to have. Now, I know that sounds complicated, but bear with me. The first part of that experience is a composition. And that's how you stand in relation to whatever you're creating a photo of, right? This is in Couture. It escaped me for a half a second, but it came back, thank goodness. This is in Couture. There's a lot going on. So you think, what am I trying to capture in this photo? The experience I wanted for the viewers, first of all, you want to emphasize your subject, right? You want it to be clear. What is your subject? What am I looking at? If there's a lot going on and you don't have some sort of emphasis on your subject, then the viewer's eyes just kind of bounce around. What do I look at? What am I looking at? The ruins here is my subject. So I place them in a very specific part of the frame, that kind of central in the front part at the corner. So that's where your eyes start as the viewer. And then you go back to the red roof buildings and eventually back to the bay and to the ship and of course to the mountains in the background. But the first step is, what's your subject? That's where you want your viewer to start. That's the beginning point of your little journey. And sometimes when you have a big picture of something going on, an easy way to hone in the subject is by narrowing your field. This is a market in Toulouse, France. So there are vendors and beautiful architecture around the market. There's all this great produce, the vendors selling it, the people picking up the produce. I wanted to tell the story of the specific act of picking produce at the market. So what I did is I eliminate distractions and I fill my frame with that subject. Now there's lots of other produce, but I made the hand picking the produce the prominent subject in the front. So composition means eliminating distractions. It means making your subject the prominent player. Like, this is the star of my photo, is what your viewer sees later. Now, lighting is another great way to lead the viewer, to emphasize your subject, but it doesn't always cooperate. And light can mean what's brightest in color or what's more brightly lit. So this subject is the lady in the white coat with the red scarf. She's waiting for that fish delivery to come and she's standing right there. So it helps that she's wearing white. You know, I don't have a flash that I carry around when I travel because well, first of all, I don't like to carry a lot of equipment. And second of all, to pull out a flash and shine it on somebody when you're trying to take a street photo would be awkward. So when you're working with natural light, you got to kind of go with what you're given. But she's brighter, so that helps her become more prominent of a subject. And this is another example where, it kind of worked for me. I wanted to make this the Arc de Triomphe, my subject. The leading lines of the street bring me right up to the Arc de Triomphe, the leading lines of the flags and the trees. It's like your eyes just go right there. Part of that is the way the environment is set up, but part of it is how I compose the photo. So I stand a little off center. I get the leading lines to go up into the subject, but then the subject's also lit by the sun. It's sunrise, the sun's coming up. It's a brighter object in color, and the light helps me. You can't always control that, but that's what editing is for. And don't worry, we're going to get to that a little bit later. Now, another factor that helps you give a good viewer experience, kind of lead the viewer through your photo, emphasize your subject, is the camera settings. Always, right? They're always there somewhere, those camera settings. Now, one aspect of camera settings is aperture. Aperture helps define where you want the eyes to land based on depth of field. So in this photo, I have the locks on the bridge and I have the Eiffel Tower in the background. I also have buildings kind of leading up to the Eiffel Tower. What do your eyes go to? What's in focus? Our eyes go to what's in focus and what's most bright. So by using a shallow depth of field, I focused on the Eiffel Tower to make that clearly my subject. And then the locks in the foreground, you see them, you know what they are, but because they're more softly focused, your eyes don't sit there. They don't start there. It's just an extra element that adds to the story, right? Now here, composition-wise, I placed my lion statue in the left lower corner because he's kind of my subject, right? I liked him. I love the backdrop. It's really more of a story. So when you have a story in your photo, and I think most of us tend to want a story and not just, a pretty picture. That's why we're here. So you have different elements. You have your subject, but then you have supporting elements. You have context. Well, the context is he's in London, and these buildings behind you and the red bus give you that context. But what I did is I used my shutter speed, a slow shutter speed here of 1/20th of a second, so that the bus would be blurred. So I have my subject in focus. I used a shallow depth of field, so he would be more in focus than the rest. And then I used a slow shutter speed so that the bus would look blurred. What that does is it just gives a different feel to it. It feels like motion, energy. It adds that element of kind of energy to the photo rather than just a frozen shot of the bus. Now, if all of this sounds vaguely familiar, but you forget, do not worry. I have blog posts on shutter speed, on Aperture, and editing, all the different components I talk about, and I'll link to those specific blog posts so you can find them to refresh your memory. We all need refreshers, right? Takes a while for all of this to sink in. And now, we've talked about composition, lighting, camera settings, and how they help the viewer experience. Now we're going to talk about editing. And that's when all the stars do not align and you don't get perfect lighting. You don't choose the exact right camera setting and the composition doesn't work out just as planned. Because, hey, we're all in a hurry. So no matter how well you know those elements, sometimes when you're out and about, it just doesn't all pull together like you want it to. And that is why editing is like magic. Here's a before and after. What I want you to look at in the before is, what do you look at first? As the viewer, where do your eyes land? What do you see? And if you hear little tippy tap noises, that's Maggie. She's walking around. She's very disturbed today because our neighbor is visiting. She's a landlord, so she doesn't live there. She owns the house, and she's getting ready to put in another tenant. So she's there doing some work, and she brings her little dog with her. Maggie's not pleased about that. So she walks around a lot. All right, back to your experience. What do you see on the left? And when I say what do I see, what do you see? I don't mean that looks like Italy. That looks like a lady walking down the street, but I can't see her very well. Tell me where your eyes go first. And this is how I want you to start thinking about your photos when you look at them. Where do your eyes land? Where do they go next? Do they get stuck somewhere or pulled somewhere? Sometimes if there's a distraction, and a distraction can be something bright and shiny, something obnoxious, like a trash can, your eyes can just keep going there. So even though you know this is the subject, I keep looking at the other thing because it just pulls your eye. And it's not something we're conscious of. It's kind of an automatic deep in there, like crows go to shiny, bright objects. We have some crow in our brain too, I guess. So it's shiny and bright and in focus we go towards, whether it's our subject or not. So with editing, go over to the right side. I brightened her. I took down the highlights. So I tried to even it out and I tried to give you a path. So now she's brighter, and I even made it a little brighter on the alley, on the ground beneath her. What that does is it brightens her, makes her more obvious, but it also gives you a path. So as the viewer now, you look at her, and then you go back down the street. You look up at the buildings, and eventually you get to the sky. Go back over to the left. You were drawn in by that sky, right? The building in the front, upper left, and the sky. They're the brightest, and your eyes just kind of get stuck there. And eventually you find her down there, but you get stuck where it's brightest. So now I have them separated. So this is the Musée d'Orsay. And I want you to think about, what is your viewer experience? What do you feel when you look at this? What do you see? I'm going to guess you say, I see a window that looks like a clock. And that might be all. There's something behind it. You can see something through the window. Now, what is your experience? The subject is Montmartre through the window. You can see it back there, and I think your eye probably goes there first because it's a prominent, it's bright, and it's this tiny little building through there. So you can see that's the view through the clock. But now you also see what's in the foreground. You see the desks, and you might even start with the shiny kind of lampshades, the foreground, and go up to Montmartre, which is fine. I want the subject to be clear, and that's your view out the window. But I also think this context around it is so cool, but I don't want it to be distracting. So a lot of it is about balance, changing the brightness, changing the darkness, giving it that extra pop, that extra zing, but making sure that as you're looking at it, there's kind of an order to what you want your viewer to look at. I want them to end up on the subject, but in order to get there, I might want them to follow a leading line. Or I want them to start here, end up there, and not get distracted by this over here on the left. So I'm going to take that out. Those are the kind of processes you go through as you edit your photos. What do I want them to look at first? What's the subject? Is there anything distracting that's pulling the eye away? All right, let's look at another example that ties it all together. This is a wine tasting in Bordeaux. And the photo you might look at and think, it's not the best photo. I don't think so either. The composition here is, I wanted the subject to be her hands grabbing the wine glasses. She's doing the wine tasting. She's reaching down to those glasses and she's going to hand them to us. Lucky me. I love wine tastings. What ended up happening, it's a little dark. The lighting ends up over here on the right, just naturally. And the whole photo is a little dark. The reason is I did that on purpose because it's bright on the right. I want to decrease the overall so that I don't have anything blown out. Also a blog post on that. Camera settings. I used a shallow depth of field so that I could, with that, eliminate some of the distractions in the background. Now, editing, yeah, it needs some help because there's still some distractions. There's still not good brightness on my subject. It's a distracting. The bright is distracting. So here's what I want you to do. Look at this photo and where do your eyes go first? My eyes go to the right because it's brightest, especially that the fifth wine glass from the left, it's bright and it's red and it's pretty and my eyes sit right there. That's not my subject though. I also get distracted by the menu in the front, by the kind of window in the back. Now let's look at the edited version. I cropped it to eliminate some distractions. I brightened her hands because that's my subject. I even darkened a little bit to the right so that it wasn't too distracting. So based on the way I pulled it all in, now what's your experience? What do you look at? What do you see first? I see her hands grabbing the wine glasses. I see the beautiful reflection or the beautiful light going through that gorgeous colored red wine. I see the bottle in the background. And that is exactly the viewer experience I want you to have. And me, it's been several years since I've been. So this is the experience I want for me. Because I want to feel like I'm there. Like I see her reaching for those glasses. This one, I feel like, yeah, there's some wine glasses. There's some hands. But now I feel like, oh, I'm about to get that glass handed to me and I can't wait to taste it. So I really want to know what you think. Yes, Carol is saying what she sees in these. There's a little bit of delay, and so I didn't see your comments, Carol, but I'm guessing when I said, "What do you see?" you were telling me what you saw. And thank you for your input. Color first and then the lighter forms. Yes. And then to the right with the light. Exactly. And that's not where I wanted the eye to go, where it was lighter on the right. But that's where the natural light kind of brought us. I can't emphasize enough how important editing is. I know some of you say, my photos don't need it, or I don't want to. But we all need it. It's just a fact of life. And it's so fun. Okay. So as you watch this later, let me know what your thoughts are. Is this something you think of with your photos, or is it kind of a new concept? I think it's the way to elevate your photos from just a picture to an experience. I know that sounds pretty intense, doesn't it? An experience. Who doesn't want their photos to be an experience? Okay, so to watch the replay here and for more videos, check out my YouTube channel. Do not forget to subscribe, bephotofluent.com/YouTube. There's an entire blog post about this very subject. I'll link to all of this too, so you don't have to put those links in. That's too hard. More bephotofluent.com/blog/more than pretty picture. It's a long one. If you're interested in joining our private Facebook group, which is full of fun, creative travelers, find us on Facebook at PhotoFluent Travelers. And if you haven't heard, drum roll, please. I wish I had sound effects because the drum roll would be really fun right now. I'll figure that out. I just opened the photo storytelling retreat in Tuscany for enrollment. I know. It is going to be so cool. I couldn't be more excited about it. Whenever I look at the page, I get excited and I can't wait. It is filling up. So it's not until next fall of 2022. So if you're a little worried about travel because it's just starting back up again, it isn't for another year. However, there's only 10 slots. And once they fill up and it's done. So go over to this website, stradatuscana.com/retreats/in. Too long. Of course, I'll link to that. Let me know if you have any questions. There's going to be truffle hunting and pizza making and wine tasting and medieval villages with your camera. And of course, I'm going to help you tell your story. And then after the whole retreat's over, we're all going to get back together on Zoom and do some editing so that you can really see what the viewer experience, what ended up like, what it could be. Yeah, it's going to be fun. Can you tell I'm excited? So excited. So let me know if you have any questions about that or any questions about your viewer experience. So thanks for joining. Have a lovely Thursday. Have a lovely weekend, and I will see you very soon.